Welcome to Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Charlotte Hall Museum in Prescott, Arizona. My special guest today is Patrick Kuykendall, and he is a native of Prescott, Arizona. Is that right, Patrick?
Born and raised.
Born
June
and
1st,
raised.
1965.
How about that? You know, I do a lot of talks here across Yavapai County and on about Charlotte Hall. And one of the questions I ask is, you know, last night at 100 Men Who Care, I asked the audience how many people in the audience were born in Arizona. And last night was typical, maybe a little bit more. We had a very strong group of men and women from our greater Quad City area there for 100 Men Who Care, helping raise money for Charlotte Hall Museum, the Museum of Indigenous People, the Western Heritage Center, and the Prescott Frontier Days Rodeo Foundation. And what's interesting about living in Arizona, as I was born in Los Angeles and actually in Santa Monica, is that Charlotte Hall herself was born in Kansas and came here as an 11-year-old. And I think that it's very relatable to a lot of people when they realize that, you know, she came from somewhere else, like as so many other people have over the last 150 years to help build our territory and our state. So it's great to be able to sit down with someone who's actually born and raised here in Prescott. And I know before we started the show, we were talking a lot about the landmarks of downtown Prescott and how much has changed in your lifetime. And greatly appreciate you being here today, Patrick, because we have a lot to talk about. And you were describing something about your childhood. And did you grow up downtown? Did you grow up out of town? Tell me a little bit about that.
No, you know, we grew up out of town. We born and raised on Antelope Hills Golf Course.
Okay.
So 7.5 miles north of Prescott. You know, I've always lived out there. I've always had a residency. I've grown up as a kid growing up. Always owned a house out there.
Mm-hmm.
We've had businesses out there, but, you know, definitely out of town, but a lot of great memories of downtown. My grandmother used to live up here by the old windmill where the real estate office was. So she was up there. So as kids going to Washington Elementary, I'd walk to my grandmother's house and stop by the corner drugstore up there and have a penny or two in my pocket, buy some candy, and
some bazooka gum.
That's exactly right, and go see Grandma.
Now, was your dad born and raised here? Or did your family come to Prescott?
Dad came in the late 50s. He was
Okay.
with Phillips Petroleum and worked for them, did a lot of deliveries out of Yuma, and then he got the distributorship here, opened a gas station there in Granite Dells, and right there where Casey's is now. And one day this gentleman came in and middle of summer in a suit and tie, and Dad said, "Hey, partner, what you doing?" And he goes, "I've come to town with 2 Toyota cars, and I can't find a dealer here that will take on the Toyota franchise." And Dad goes, "What the hell's a Toyota?" So he walks outside, and the gentleman had a little Hilux pickup truck and a Corona car. Dad looked at it and said, "This is pretty cool. What does it take to be a dealer?" And he said a $10,000 line of credit. So they jumped in the Hilux pickup, drove downtown to Chuck Atkins at Arizona Bank, got a $10,000 line of credit. Dad put the gentleman back on the bus to Phoenix, and he was a Toyota dealer, which we were in the automobile business here until the early 80s.
I love that story. You know, the serendipitous nature of, you know, Prescott and its history. This is just another one of those great stories. You know, I've talked to a number of residents whose families moved here, maybe their parents or grandparents, and there's this serendipity, and I still believe that serendipity is alive and well here in Prescott, and the doors are still open for people to come here who have a dream or an opportunity, and those doors open, and another door opens, and you become part of this great community.
Well, do you think it's a dream, though? And I look at it because it seems like everybody you meet had either a relative that lived here or knew about Prescott.
Sure.
You know, very seldom do you say, "Hey, you know, I just popped out off the turnip truck and found Prescott and I'm going to move here." It's always, "Well, you know, I had this friend that moved to Prescott 10 years ago. We stopped by one time and liked it." You know, and very seldom do you find somebody that hasn't been planning the trip.
True.
You know, you look at a lot of the law enforcement, you know, we're very big on, especially Los Angeles PD and them moving over here, Orange County Sheriffs coming in.
Came here a lot in the 70s for the rodeo.
But they scoped it out and maybe bought a piece of land, maybe bought a house, but it took them a while to be able to come out here. Like I said, very seldom do you find somebody that just popped in today and they bought a house tomorrow and they're here. People have done their research, scoped it out, found out the climate, the great things to do. The people are nice. You know, there's an attraction here, but it took people a while to get here, just like the settlers.
That's very true. And tell me about where that gas station was. Is it still there? Is it the 76 station?
It's right across the street.
Okay.
That trailer there, that's now the automotive shop. That's it. And there was a trailer behind it, and that's where that was our house.
And where did the Toyota dealership start?
The Toyota dealership was right there with 2 vehicles in front of the gas station. And then eventually, as Dad got more into the automobile business, right here where Foothills Bank is on the corner of Gurley, that was Kuykendall Motors. And the pictures that you see where the showrooms caved in, that was ours in the big snowstorm of '67.
Now, was Bennett Oil not too far from you? Were they in that area?
Bennett Oil was down here, and then you had the Coke plant where the school owns over here. A lot of old stuff, and then you had Ore Valley, Dotson.
Well, I hope you will promise me today we're going to do a walking and driving tour. I have some memories of my childhood coming here to Prescott quite a bit in the 70s.
Love to.
And but I would love to walk the streets with you through your 10-year-old memory. You know, as a 10-year-old, you know, and those are some magic memories because as a kid, I would come over again. How did I get interested in Prescott, Arizona? Well, my dad was sent to Orem School in 1945 as a 9-year-old. And so Prescott was always a destination every summer from Los Angeles. We came to Phoenix, came up to Orem Ranch, and we came into Prescott. And I have great memories of the plaza and, you know, the what was the name of the ice cream shop downtown? Was it Kendall's?
No, it was before Kendall's. I have to think of that one.
But there was that was
Sure.
on the Billy Jack. It was filmed right there.
Sure. Well, you know, we've had a lot of, we've had Whataburgers, we've had Sambo's,
right.
We've had a lot of restaurants.
Come and go.
Bob's Big Boy.
Right. Oh,
you know,
wouldn't you love to have a Bob's again?
Yeah, wouldn't that be great?
It sure would.
But, you know, it's just great, the memories, because, you know, I still run into people I've never known that are longtime Prescottonians and say, hey, your dad sold me my first car.
I love that.
You know, and he carried it. We didn't have a down payment. We helped him. And, you know, we know Joe McIlvain, which is right across the street, used to be McIlvain Motors. You know, he financed the majority of his cars, 2 families here in Prescott. They bought their first new car or used car from Joe,
right.
and he'd finance it. And, you know, they'd drive it, then they'd trade it in. And, I mean, that's how we did business here.
Yeah, that's right. Tell me about where was Washington Elementary School?
Just right down here on Gurley Street. Still is where I think the administration buildings are there. That's where they hold the
right.
That's where they hold, yes.
So you were driven into town every single day to go to school in downtown?
Yes, sir. Bus number 6 with Mr. Fee.
How about that?
Yeah, drove us in. We'd come in out of the airport, and then we'd go through Granite Dells, pick up kids, go out on Wells Ranch on the old 89A and work our way into Washington, and then it would go to the junior high.
Right.
And then it'd go to the high school. But that was back in the day when everybody came to Prescott. You know, there was no Bradshaw Mountain. There was no Chino Valley High School. There was no Skull Valley. Everybody was bussed in. So the kids in Skull Valley, you know, that was a good long 2-hour bus ride in and
that's for sure.
2 hours back.
Yeah. So has anyone done your oral history here at the museum? We have our great archives and library, one of the best in the state, with a great oral history program. Have you sat down to have your told your story?
I'm going to have to do it. I'm going to have to tell my story.
Yes, you are.
Okay.
So let's take a quick break and thank our sponsors and come back and talk a little bit about growing up in Prescott and then, you know, some of your thoughts on where Prescott's going today.
Roger
we'll be
that.
right back.
At Foothills Bank, they're not just about banking. They're about people, community, and building futures. Whether you're managing personal finances, growing your business, planning for retirement, or buying your dream home, their friendly team is there to guide you every step of the way. Stop by your local Foothills Bank today. It's more than just banking. It's a partnership for success. Foothills Bank is a division of Glacier Bank, member FDIC.
History matters. For nearly 100 years, the Charlotte Hall Museum has preserved our community's story, and over at Findlay Toyota, they believe in that same legacy of trust and reliability. That's why we're proud they support us here at the Charlotte Hall Museum. Just as Toyota has a long history of building vehicles you can depend on, Findlay is committed to our community's future. Go see their amazing selection of new and used Toyotas. Experience a legacy of quality for yourself. Findlay Toyota on Willow Creek Road in Prescott.
And are you looking for the perfect summer adventure for you, your kids? Experience more than a camp with us at Charlotte Hall Museum. That's right. Starting the 8th of June, kids age 7 to 13 can dive right into hands-on history outdoor adventures, and unforgettable fun. So you choose the perfect fit for your schedule, from single-day activities like the Explorer's Path to immersive 5-day adventures like surviving Prescott 1864. There is summertime fun happening here for everyone at the museum, and this is the place to be for you and your family. Reserve your spot today. Call 928-445-3122. That number again, 928-445-3122, or visit charlottehallmuseum.org.
Welcome back to Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Charlotte Hall Museum. I'm here with my friend Patrick, and we are talking about his childhood growing up here in Prescott, Arizona. And, you know, you don't meet a lot of people who spent most of their life here in Prescott, Arizona. But Patrick, you have come and gone. Have you spent some time away here? When you were a young man, did you decide to leave Yavapai County and take a step away from your hometown?
Yes, sir. I graduated from high school here in Prescott in June of 1983. In September, I was in the United States Army at the infantry school at Fort Benning. So I did 4 years of active duty, came back, joined the Arizona National Guard, came back to Prescott, then back in, and we were in the hotel business. My brother and I purchased the hotel from the family, and in 2009, when Father decided to run for mayor, I'd had enough of making beds and doing laundry and stuff, and I said, you know, it's probably a good time to sell, and Dad's going to become mayor and do something else. So I went over to California with a Department of Defense contract over there for 7.5 years, working with the National Guard and the reserve components, and Dad was mayor. And then in 2016, when him and Tana both got diagnosed with cancer, I said, I'm coming home, and I've been back ever since.
All right. And from what research I did before the show, you followed in the footsteps of your father, who was also in the United States Army. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And is that a long tradition in your family?
You know, it wasn't. You know, the father, some of his brothers did, but our grandpa, which I didn't know, he had passed away before I was born, but, you know, he was a farmer and rancher in Texas. And Dad joined the Army and then went into the reserves and, you know, stayed about 7 years, was commissioned. He was enlisted, and then he got commissioned without a college degree back then when you could. That's a big deal. And then, you know, I kind of took over after him.
Well, that's a grand tradition. I appreciate your service, Patrick.
Thank you so much.
It's a very important part of our community here. We have a strong veterans community here, and we're going to talk about that today. And was your dad influential in your decision to join the U.S. Army, or is it all on your own? You
know, I think he was kind of like wondering, because we were in the family business. You know, we had a lot of businesses, but, you know, and I was working. You know, I was doing a lot of the stuff with him, but I think he was proud. And, you know, I think it's the best thing you can do. You know, so many people, you know, they look at education, and education is one of the most important things you can do. But service to your country, I take that a little higher. And I wish more students or more of our college would look at the opportunities through the military to pay for their education to help them build leadership. You know, and that's the thing is, you know, you really look at when you go to college, and not degrading a college education, because it's important, but, you know, you do your 4 years, you go out, you do internships. By the time you get to really into management or leadership, you're, you know, 10, 11 years out of high school. Some people earlier. But in the military, you know, you're a leader from the time you get off that bus, because you're going to be a platoon sergeant. You're going to, at basic training, they're teaching you leadership. And, you know, you look at now, 19-year-old tank commanders, you know, with, you know, $100 million tanks, and, you know, running airplanes and doing this stuff. Right. I mean, leadership is a big thing. So, you know, I'm proud of our men and women in the armed forces for taking that step. But some of the best things you can ever do, and less than 1% of the people served. And I wish more people would step up and say, you know, and to those that wanted to but couldn't, you know, we appreciate your support.
Right. Yeah, I had a lot of college roommates and fraternity brothers who actually were U.S. Army, and they were there on our OTC scholarships. And the early 80s, you and I are just a couple years apart. I started college in 81. And, you know, here in Prescott, the Fort Whipple, and it's the role it plays here in our community. For our listeners, there are a lot of people know Arizona, its history, its glamour from Arizona highways, a place to visit. But Arizona has a very strong military history going back to the 1840s. And Fort Whipple, right now, from my research, is the second oldest federal site here in the state of Arizona. Fort Defiance is just a little older on the Navajo Reservation, but continuously operated as a federal military or veterans hospital since 1864. And it's still one of the most important VAs in the American Southwest. And
we'll just say it's the best VA in the Southwest.
It just received a 5-star rating this week, and from nationally, it is one of the best VA in Arizona. And we have my wife actually works at the VA, and there are patients that travel hundreds of miles to come to the VA.
Well, they come off the reservation, but I think we have to take something, Stuart, really into perspective. And everybody loves a veteran. Thank you, veterans. Thank you. But we always have to thank our law enforcement.
Yes,
how many people would have raised their right hand and said, you know what, I'm leaving my family here in Prescott, Arizona, because I'm going to go join the military and I could get called to combat. I could do that. If it wasn't for our first responders, our doctors, our nurses, our police officers, our firefighters, would anybody raise their right hand to go serve the country? It would be a tough decision if there was not peace on the home front and security and safety on the home front.
That's a great point.
Would somebody go across? So I want to say a big thank you to all of our first responders, our law enforcement, because they are the true heroes.
That's right. And I don't know if everyone knew last week when the flags were flying at half staff across Prescott, Arizona, and across the state, that we were honoring our fallen officers. And something that, without the local news, we do have our local newspaper, but, growing up, I'm reminded of the evenings, nightly news, local news, and
Walter
news,
Cronkite.
that there would be an announcement in school. There would be an announcement on the, you would come home and say, hey, Mom and Dad, did you know why the flags are at half staff? Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot more has to be done to remind people of those special days when we honor our law enforcement.
How honored we are to memorialize our fallen first responders, and then a week later memorialize our veterans and those heroes that served and fought for our country. So the ones that protect our local, and then the ones fighting, all within a week, is just what a proud day to be an American.
Right. Really remarkable. Now, you were telling me a story before the show started about a memory you have growing up in Prescott. I'm sure there had to be a little bit of a police escort. You were going to school at Washington Elementary, right down on Gurley.
Close to Jim Dandy hot dogs.
Oh, man, that sounds like
just right down, right up the block, we had Jim Dandy's.
Man, that sounds good. Mm-hmm. Didn't you have Baskin Robbins not too far away?
Baskin Robbins was just right down the hill.
I remember that.
It was the old meat market, and I think it's a nail shop now.
Yeah, I remember that Baskin Robbins for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a house here on campus where I met you before our interview on the podcast called the Bashford House. Tell us a little bit about your memories of the Bashford House and how it walked its way down the street to the Charlotte Hall Museum.
And I should have brushed up a little bit. I forgot what year that was, but
about 73, 74, right. 75,
okay.
Right in there.
So we were, I think, 5th or 6th grade,
mm-hmm.
right there at Washington Elementary, and we watched him forever. Bernie Fisher and the whole gang over there with their big trucks and bringing the big steel rods in underneath the big pillars. And one day it came up out of the ground, and they blocked the road off. The school, we're all standing out in front of the school, and they put it on the back of the truck and started pulling it out, made the left-hand turn, and started going down Gurley Street.
That had to be something to see.
That was, I wish I would have had a camera back then. I wish we had cell phones.
Right.
And I'd have some great footage of that one.
Well, we want to have a special day here at Charlotte Hall where we post it in the paper, we announce it well in advance, a Saturday where we invite residents of Prescott who were here, and I've taught who were here in town when the Bashford House made the move. Because mm-hmm. I have heard anecdotally from a variety of people who have good memories, both the Bashford House and the Fremont House. And aren't we fortunate that those two houses were saved, that the citizenry rallied, we had the space here at the Charlotte Hall Museum to take on those houses. We had a lot of hands who were participated in making sure those homes survived and now help tell the story of that era of Prescott. And, both of them are within just a few yards, 10 to 20 yards of the Territorial Governor's Mansion, which is a ponderosa pine hand-hewed log cabin built in 1864. And then right across the way is the Fremont House, and not too far away, the Bashford House. And it tells you so much about the pride of our community. People said, we're making Arizona, we're going to build the Arizona Territory into a state. We're going to build Prescott into the territorial capital, kind of the hub city of northern Arizona. But we're not just going to wait and live in log cabins forever. We're going to make this a modern town, as modern as it can be. Even if the trains weren't arriving here, did not arrive here really steadily until the 1890s. So when you see these beautiful homes from the 1870s and the 1880s, the pride in craftsmanship, the pride of the community, the men and women who decided to put a stake down in the ground and say, this is our new hometown. Mm-hmm. It's still remarkable to me when I walk on the campus and I see it.
Sure. Well, two things, and I like to make a challenge with you, and I'd love to help you. Have you been through the Washington School?
No, I have not.
That would be a great tour. But
I would love to do that.
You know what would be really fun is to have an event and bring back all the people that may be still living that can attend in front of Washington School and
That's
get a big group
idea.
photo, and that would be cool. And I'd love to get Clark Tenney to get you a tour of that. But second of all, you talk about craftsmanship, and right there next to the Legion, the American Legion on 202 South Pleasant, the house that is directly west of it, that house came from Jerome. It was brought down from Jerome. So,
wow,
that's something that would be great to do some history on. Not only do
down the hill from Jerome,
somehow it got over here, but how many houses that are in our historic district have been brought in from, maybe moved from Prescott, or like I said, that house Bill and Mindy own, that was brought down from Jerome and is still a livable house. That's their residency, but. If walls could
audacious.
Talk, what if streets could talk?
Right.
We talk about walls talking. What if streets could talk? What if different areas could talk? There's so much history that we just don't know about. But I think, with Washington Elementary, and I don't know the history, but it's got to be one of our oldest buildings, in the area.
Well, I think we need to make that a cause. I think that, the school district has been here, one of the oldest school districts in the state, obviously, the Prescott School District, being the territorial capital and some of the first schools for school children in the Arizona Territory. And we can capture this and put an all call out and said, anyone living who went to Washington Elementary. And it reminds me something I did at the College of William & Mary and at Orem School, and that is, when anyone was inducted into their 50th high school or college reunion, we always held an event that invited everyone back every year. So if you'd graduated in class of 83 and 2023 would have been your 40th, right? So we're all coming up on our 50th year in a few years from now. But the fun thing about it is that once you hit your 50th, you come back for the lunch. Everyone who's older than that 50 years comes back.
Right.
But then the reunions I've held, and I went to an all-boys school in Los Angeles, we started broadening our reunion so that we had more classes back, not just our class. And so you got the older brothers and sisters, the younger brothers and sisters. Maybe there's some teachers you could bring back. And then suddenly there's a community spirit. It's not just your classmates. It's more than that. It's the boys and girls and the teachers and the people who created the community of your school. Mm-hmm. I would love to be able to have done that with my elementary school in Los Angeles. But here in Prescott, I think we'd have a chance to do something pretty special.
Sure. Well, it's a lot more fun to see people when they're living than going to their funerals.
I'd love that.
I've heard that many times.
Line.
What a great thing. And, we get so tied up and we get so wrapped up, and we got to remember where we came from. Mm-hmm. You came from somewhere else. I'm sure you still have memories and you want to go back.
Sure.
And we want to tell our story here. And, Prescott, and there's more to it. It's just like the Ernest A. Love Post 6.
Right.
Supposedly, really, Prescott did have the first post, but through politics or something, they gave the number 1 up. And I'll find out for that. But, just so much history.
I love it. Let's take another quick break and come back and talk some more here. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of your dedication to veteran services here in Prescott, Arizona.
For over 45 years, Blind Brothers Arizona has been the heart of window style in Prescott. From blinds, shutters, drapes, they custom design and install with the expert precision. Tailored to you, whether for your home or office. Trust the name locals rely on. Visit blindbrothersaz.com today or call 928-776-1845 for a free consultation. Blind Brothers Arizona, the original since 1979.
Get ready for an unforgettable evening of music, history, and tradition at Charlotte Hall Museum's Twilight Tales on Tuesday, June 9th. Starting at 5 p.m., experience the electrifying energy of bluegrass with the Arizona Wildflowers, a talented sibling band with tight harmonies and fiddle playing. But hurry, seating is limited and tickets are just $30 per person. Visit charlottehallmuseum.org to reserve your tickets today.
Here's an idea for you to think about right now. How about kicking off your 4th of July holiday weekend here for the 250th anniversary of the United States at Charlotte Hall Museum? Join us on Friday, July 3rd for American Heritage Day. Here we go, a family-friendly red, white, and blue celebration packed with patriotic fun. Grab a free hot dog while supplies last, and challenge your friends to classic yard games. Enjoy live music from our brass band, and experience history come alive with a special reading of the Declaration of Independence. That is American Heritage Day at Charlotte Hall Museum. The fun runs on Friday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. on the 3rd of July. Bring the family, celebrate our history, and make some memories. More information, visit charlottehallmuseum.org. And now we go back to the program.
Welcome back to Arizona Roundup at Charlotte Hall Museum in Prescott, Arizona. My name is Stuart Rosebrook, and my special guest today is Patrick Kuykendall. Patrick, one thing I've really been impressed as I've gotten to know you over the years is that you are an ambassador of our state. You are an ambassador of our community. You are someone who really defines what citizen leadership is all about. And last night at 100 Men Who Care, I had an opportunity to stand up and talk about Charlotte Hall. And we have a new statue to Charlotte Hall here in our Rose Garden, the territorial memorial Rose Garden, dedicated to the women who helped build this territory in this county. And your service, growing up here in Prescott, obviously your father's a role model, served in the United States Army. You worked hard as a boy, helping the enterprises, your family, as I've met many people who helped build this community in the 70s and 80s. You served your country in the United States Army, and then decided to continue to sign up, and you signed up with the National Guard. You have served overseas, been deployed overseas with the United States Army, the Arizona National Guard. But you have a passion for service to make our community better and to make the lives better for veterans. Tell me, when did that switch go off for you and you said, this is something that's going to be important to me for the rest of my life?
Well, I think that, Stuart, and I appreciate that question. I don't think you ever take the uniform off, or you take the uniform off, but you never take the mindset out.
Right.
As much as we talk about veterans, and again, like I mentioned earlier, very few veterans would ever do it if it wasn't for having your security at home.
Most definitely.
Does a police officer ever they retire, but they still always have that instinct to protect and to serve.
Your friend of mine, Craig Brown, served in the United States Army as a Green Beret, former chairman of the Board of Supervisors in Yavapai County, came back and served as a police officer in Santa Monica, California.
Exactly. And, I think once it's in your blood, it just becomes the norm. We take care of, we're in the selfless service business. We're taking care, we look out for our comrades, but we look out for our community. Businesses, when businesses are hurting, that's what I do now. I deal with businesses every day working for the state of Arizona. When they're hurting, you're trying to come up with methodology, because the last thing we need is another an empty building, or we need a business out. So how do we collaborate? Same thing with helping our veterans. Honored to serve as the Army Reserve Ambassador, being an ambassador for the Army Reserve here in Arizona, helping recruiting tension and scholarships, sitting on the board with U.S. Vets as of the advisory board, the homeless veterans. But, just like with the VA, it's when you're dealing with folks, not everybody, I've been blessed. I mean, I pinch myself every morning and I thank the good Lord and said, you know what? I was dealt a really good hand. don't blow it, Pat. And I
Right.
say that every morning, don't blow it, Pat. But some people weren't. But not everybody needs a handout. They need a hand up. How do
Right.
we bring somebody back in? Nobody went to basic training and made it through basic training without them doing it. Nobody pulled them through basic training and all of a sudden they graduated.
Right.
Nobody became a police officer because somebody dragged them across the finish line and now you're a police officer. And I think that's the thing with life is, how do we all work together? We don't have to agree, but how do we work together? How do we build a better community? How do we build a stronger military? How do we provide more safety in our communities? How do we give back? Giving back is, do I love my job? Man, I love my job more than anything else. I like volunteering and giving back more than I love my job.
Right.
The unpaid positions are so much more priceless than the paying job. You need the paying job to take care of your needs.
Right.
But the ability to give back, and dealing in workforce. Nobody woke up this morning and said, hey, I think I'll get laid off today and I'm going to go to the workforce office and have to file unemployment, file for food stamps, and help to find a job. Nobody woke up this morning doing that.
Right.
But it happens. And thank goodness we got men and women that are willing to take those needs of others and help them get back up on their feet.
Right.
And thank God for our employers. Could you imagine if we didn't have the employers in town? A lot of businesses do good and they've been successful for a long time, but how many business owners say, you know what, maybe I'll do without the new truck this year because I need to keep these people employed because their families depend on me.
Right.
And that's the mindset that we all need to be in is, can we do a little more? Can we give back a little bit? Can we do with less? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we find, just like with 100 men last night. Where else are you going to bring 130 men and women into an organization, cash money, put almost $17,000 in, and at the end of the day, you had 4 charities that now have more money than they came in with.
Exactly right.
And they could use it. They could use it last night.
That's right.
And I'm sure at least one of the charities last night probably took some of that money because they needed it to help somebody else.
That's right.
And that's the great thing about generosity. It's the unsung heroes, the silent professionals that make the difference.
Right. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing on a day-to-day basis.
I do workforce on the day-to-day basis,
Mm-hmm.
but still very active with helping our veterans.
Mm-hmm.
We have a whole department called Arizona Department of Veteran Services, which helps men and women who have served veterans with their benefits. We also have the Jobs for Veterans state grant that helps our dislocated workers, our job seekers with disabilities, underemployment. But, on a day-to-day basis, I get to talk to businesses. So I'm out in the community getting to visit really cool businesses and finding out what their needs are. Hey, how can we help? Because usually I'm the first one to hear. As soon as somebody does get laid off and they walk into the DES office and say, hey, I just got laid off from this ABC company, the first thing I do is get a call from the employment services saying, hey, one of these companies just had a layoff. And they don't want it public knowledge. They don't want to say, hey, we laid off 5 people today. Let's have a party.
Right.
That's not what it is. They reach out, I'll reach out to them and say, man, how do we stop the bleeding? What can we do? How do we, and we look at it even deeper in workforce is, we're trying to get the companies to understand, there's going to be people that don't fit your needs. There's going to be people that may not fit your culture. Send them out to us. We'll help them find other employment.
Find the right place for them.
Sure, but we're going to help you backfill that position. And during a layoff, it's a lot easier if, Stuart, I got to lay you off today. Business isn't good, but if you go out to Arizona at work, they're going to help you. You're going to leave with a better taste and know, my employer cared enough about me, even though I'm no longer with them, to get me headed the right direction rather than, hey, Stuart, we're laying you off. Have a good one and let me get your keys and go out. That's the culture we're trying to build because that's what, civil people do.
Right.
So that's what I do every day.
And how can people get a hold of you or your company if they're in a position where they need your help?
Well, just look up Arizona at Work through the Department of Economic Security here in the state of Arizona. Mm-hmm. You'll see me on there, Yavapai County.
Is there a website?
There is. I'm trying to think. Just go to DES. DES
DES
Arizona. Yeah, that's
at
going to
Work.
be the easiest because there's so many different different ones.
And have you seen in the last 5 years a growth here in Prescott, but a growth that's also needed in terms of jobs?
Well, I think we see a growth, but we want to, I think we see a growth of new people coming, but we call them seasoned workers. So our older population that may,
I love that, seasoned workers.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, they got the experience. They've worked 30 or 40 years.
Right.
Maybe Social Security is not cutting it. Maybe their investments aren't cutting it anymore. We're seeing them come back into the workforce.
Right.
Definitely we see a lot of younger workforce, but my focus right now is how do we get the underemployed that next step? Because if we don't take care of the underemployed, they'll leave.
Right.
When I see a family over there getting access and food stamps, most likely there's a problem there with their workability. They're not making enough money to be able to do it.
Right.
My biggest thing, what I tell, and I do a lot of speaking to groups, is I want to be put out of a job. I want there to be a day when nobody's filing unemployment, when nobody needs access, when nobody needs food stamps, when everybody is successfully able to get the jobs and it's fulfilling their needs, and you don't need us anymore when there's no more layoffs.
Wouldn't that be a great day?
I'm ready.
Yeah.
When that happens, I want to be put out of a job, and I think the majority of people do. And
most definitely,
we do have a great workforce here, and it's just we've got to figure out how to get our underemployed to the next step and keep working that ladder, keep working the stairs. And once we get there, we're going to be rocking and rolling.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break here and we'll thank our sponsors again. And we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about the workforce needs of Prescott, Arizona, and some of your memories of growing up in Prescott, Charlotte Hall Museum, and some things looking forward. All right?
Yes, sir.
Get ready for an unforgettable evening of music, history, and tradition at Charlotte Hall Museum's Twilight Tales on Tuesday, June 9th. Starting at 5 p.m., experience the electrifying energy of bluegrass with the Arizona Wildflowers, a talented sibling band with tight harmonies and fiddle playing. But hurry, seating is limited and tickets are just $30 per person. Visit charlottehallmuseum.org to reserve your tickets today.
Thank you, Stuart, very much. My name is Stan. I'm the radio man, and I'm the leader and founder of the Cowboy Spirit Podcasting and Publishing Storytelling Collective, and it's my privilege and pleasure to help put together this fine program that Stuart and the staff at Charlotte Hall Museum make possible. And so I would like to ask you to really support them, support their mission of bringing Western world, the mile-high cowboy city of Prescott, Arizona, all of the good things about the West and the tradition that has made America great. Bring that together and make sure it's there for the young people. It's an educational resource. It's an entertainment. It is a way to learn, grow, and build community together. And we've had many activities already suggested, but also in June we have a continuation of our author series. And I would especially invite you to think about Saturday, June 27th, and 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Michael Blake, who has written a book which we talked about last week called Go West, Mr. President, and it is the story of the cowboy president, Theodore Teddy Roosevelt. And you get a special discount if you are a member. So please go to charlottehallmuseum.org, charlottehallmuseum.org, and reserve your spot. Here we go. Let's finish it up and hear the rest of the story.
Welcome back to Arizona Roundup at Charlotte Hall Museum with Stuart Rosebrook. And my special guest today is Patrick Kuykendall. Patrick, we've had a great afternoon talking about Prescott and your career and growing up here. Do you have any childhood memories of coming to Charlotte Hall Museum? Was it someplace that, you regularly visited, or it was just a place that it was an established museum?
Well, it definitely wasn't what it is today. I mean, you've done a great job of throughout the years and with your leadership, but you got to remember the whole town was historic.
Right.
We walked up Mount Vernon Street. Everywhere you went, was historic.
That's true.
Growing up at Washington Elementary, you got Taylor Hicks. The schools were named after folks in the community in Lincoln and Washington and Taylor Hicks, Prescott Junior High, but we grew up in the best society, with, we didn't have air conditioners. That's what a lot of people don't realize.
Right.
Growing up here, we didn't have an air conditioner. You just opened your windows at night, cooled it down during the day. You shut down everything, turn your fans on, and it cooled the house down, or you had a swamp cooler. But, now we've got air conditioners that, freeze you out. But, we had the old pool out in Granite Dells that, we used to swim at. We had camps. I mean,
Right.
That's the importance of the camps.
Oh, summer. This was the summer camp capital of Arizona.
Was. And, I think we have people now that no longer think that the camps are so, but, where else are kids going to get out of the 117-degree temperatures and be able to come up here, whether it's a church camp, a youth camp, a family camp.
My
camps.
mother went to Skyway camp here and Girl Scout camp in the 40s and 50s. Our daughter went to camp here. Our kids went to the Orem summer camp. I went to the Orem camp. I have lots of friends who went to Friendly Pines. I know people who were involved with the camps all over here in Prescott. And just like folks who went to the dude ranches, the friends of mine that I know that enjoyed all the church camps, Girl Scouts, the private camps like Friendly Pines and the Corsica Coffee Bar Ranch Camp, the Chauncey Ranch Camp, it introduced those children to an opportunity of independence and freedom, lessons of life. They discovered friends that they never would have known. They discovered how to achieve things they never thought they knew they could achieve. And camps have played an economic role in Prescott's growth just as much as the dude ranches of Wickenburg and Tucson. Like our rodeo, these are cornerstones of our community that defined tourism, travel. It defined the importance of the climate. And the Iron Springs, the generations of family who had a cabin here, could be up in Walker, could be up in Mingus Mountain. And I think that's one of the things you and I are talking about today also, is that the traditions of livelihoods that define a community. And without those camps, without those generations of people, as you and I were talking, I said, you know what? I had a great time there for 5 summers growing up, going to the Y camp. Then they were a camp counselor. And
well, it gives the kids a place to work.
Correct.
It worked around their schedule. You're out of school for the summer. What are you going to do?
I worked 3 summers at Orem Ranch, and then I came back and worked there as an adult, and now I've moved back to Prescott. You were saying earlier, someday I might live there, and it could take you 40 years to get there.
But that was the goal. Everybody that moved here had a goal to live here.
That's right. And we were so fortunate when an opportunity happened for my wife. She's going to come back to Arizona from Iowa City. She got an appointment at the VA in Prescott. I was able to come. We were able to move back here and finally make this our hometown.
Well, I'm going to throw one at you. And I found it, my stepmom is getting ready to sell the family house. And they had some belongings, the Lou King Ranch.
Oh, yeah.
I found some coasters from the Lou King Ranch still in the package. And through Father, I got to go out to the ranch quite a bit and spend time with Lou King. But I need to do some research. I've forgotten. I mean, that
sounds like a good article on the Lou King Ranch.
But Lou King, out there in Paulden.
Right. I'm
going to do some research on that and get more. But I found those coasters and I said, man, I remember the Lou King Ranch growing up as a kid.
Well, and that's those, up and down Route 66 and Route 89. They just announced this last week. They were celebrating Paulden's centennial. And I would suspect that Paulden's centennial has a lot to do with US 89 being built the same time as Route 66 as we celebrate our US highways. And one of our goals here at the museum is also reminding people of Prescott's role, not just in the growth of Yavapai County, not just in the growth of Arizona, but in the growth of our nation. This is a very important city in the growth of the American West, and as a country, its role along in our national defense, our county. I talk a lot about how the fact that once the citizens of Prescott and working with Santa Fe Railroad built that railroad to Prescott, connecting it down from the Santa Fe Railroad to the Southern Pacific on to Los Angeles, we had entrepreneurs that came to Jerome and said, we're going to buy that mine because now I know that we can build a railroad to take the ore off of Jerome, off of Mingus Mountain, down onto a railroad and ship it out. And World War I historians credit the copper mines of Yavapai County as one of the reasons that we won World War I. The cotton fields in Goodyear. People, one of my goals here at the museum is to also place Arizona in its greater context and its role in building a modern 20th century, now 21st century America. And climate, cotton, cattle, citrus, right? Copper, now computers. But these defining economic factors help create our great state. Not just climate, not just vacationers, not just tourism. While tourism remains one of the top two, I think aerospace and defense may have now outgrown the economics of tourism. But I know at one point, tourism annually still brings about $19 billion to the state of Arizona.
That's not bad.
$19 billion.
That's a lot of money.
And Prescott has positioned itself and needs to remember that we are on the way to the Grand Canyon.
Sure.
That we at Charlotte Hall Museum, we are a place where you can immerse yourself in our state history and then go out and explore what you learn about here. And that's what I love about telling people to come to Prescott is come here, stay for 3 or 4 days. If you're on vacation, immerse yourself in our local history, and then what you've learned here, go out and do it. You can just go up the road over Jerome, discover the mining history, to Tootsie Goot, to Montezuma's Castle, Oak Creek Canyon, and the beauty of Arizona, up to Williams or Flagstaff, the Grand Canyon. And it's such a wonderful place to promote, but also to live and realize that we also host that experience. I mean, I think that's the other thing is you're reminded regularly, you're a host to people's, they've saved all their money to come from as far as Australia or Wales. I had 2 couples on our museum grounds about 3 weeks ago. I said, "Thank you for being here, and where are you all from?" And the first couple said, "Oh, we're from Wales, near Bangor, Wales." I mean, way up there, out in the rural Wales. And the other couple were from Gulf Shores, Alabama. 2 couples here at Charlotte Hall Museum in Prescott, Arizona, living their dream of traveling to the American West, and one of their stops is here in Prescott. We are fortunate to be hosts and to open the doors to these wonderful people that have been coming here for a very long time. Prescott's done a great job opening the door and saying, "Come to Prescott, enjoy our beautiful climate in our town."
Sure. No, I think we got a new tagline. We'll call it Golf, Guns, and Great History. The 3 Gs. Come to Prescott.
I love that.
Yeah, you got to throw some new stuff. But let's go back.
Right.
Let's go back to reality. What if Bill Ruger had not bought the old Plastilloy van plant out there and brought Ruger guns?
Right.
There's a good chance that building would still be sitting empty, or would have went through 13.
And look at all the jobs.
That's exactly right. People
the mortgages, the kids that went to school.
Sure. But, people go, and I'm being honest, if you had a statue to put up right now for economic development, we need to find a place to put Bill Ruger's statue up, because he brought Ruger firearms and got us on the map.
Right.
How many Ruger firearms, handguns are sitting across this country that have Prescott, Arizona on them?
That's a big story.
That's a big story.
Now, was Ping Golf up here too?
The story is there. Bill Sr. got with Karsten Solheim, who was the Ping founder, and they got together and they did
guns.
Golf and guns. But where
great history.
Yeah, but I think where Mr. Solheim got into, he made the first rabbit ears for black and white TVs, is what got him into the gun business. And don't get me, I'm a history guy too, but I remember. But that'd be some research is how Ping came in. It was started out because the founder built the rabbit ears for black and white TVs.
I love that. I have great memories of my parents' old Philco. And you're like, your dad and your mom are like, "Okay, just a little bit more of that. That's good. Don't move." Oh, you moved.
Well, I'll tell you, I'll be honest, and the best TV on is the black and white TV off the antenna coming in here off the hill at night. It's got the best shows. You got Gunsmoke. You got all the old shows on there.
Are you flipping? Are you getting beaming off of Mingus?
We're beaming off of Mingus. Yeah, I bought one of those power antennas, and you know what? I'll sit on the back patio and watch the old shows, and they're just great.
Oh yeah, I love that.
Hogan's Heroes. You can't miss them.
Well, those were some simpler days in the 1970s with fewer channels.
Sure.
And we were actually talking about this recently, is that there were, my father was a television film writer, and his mentor was Earl Hamner, who wrote The Waltons. And we knew Earl and his wife Jane and their children, Scott and Carrie, very well. But as you reach an age now in your 60s, as I am, I'm 63, and you look back at why was that show, why was it special? And then you look at some of the Westerns and why they were special. And there was a lot of lessons, a lot of parables, a lot of stories that were relevant to 3 generations of family. And you could sit there and look across to your parents and say, is that how you grew up, Dad? Is that how it was for you, Mom? And they said, oh, yeah. And when the next time you see your grandmother or your grandfather, your aunt or uncle, you can ask them. They'll tell you more about what it was like to grow up at that time period. And television, I think, being nostalgic, there were a lot of men and women who were very responsible, who wrote stories knowing that there was a broad audience, only so many hours per night, and they had a responsibility to write family entertainment. And why we still are nostalgic for those shows or watch them, whether it's The Rifleman, of a father standing up for his son as a single father, or Family of, a Bonanza, or Marshall Dillon. And I had a friend of mine on the podcast here, Michael Blake, the other day, and we were talking about Westerns, and he said, Stuart, some of the values I grew up with that I still carry with me today, that code of the West, I'd ask myself, what would Marshall Dillon do? Mm-hmm. And, I think that when we talk about the values of what you do in our community, our workforce, as an advocate for our veterans, as a citizen leader, as a volunteer, these are all values that those who move to Prescott, become volunteers at Charlotte Hall Museum, or other nonprofits around the community, it still is an engine and a city in which the door is open, just like it was for Charlotte Hall, to participate and make it better. I think that's just a beautiful story happening every day here in Prescott, and I appreciate what you do for it.
Well, I appreciate that, and you're right. I think growing up as kids watching that, we're hard work. Nothing was given. And, they were funny.
Right.
They always threw in a little bit of humor, but they were serious. I mean, this was, you protected your family, and family was very important. You watched those old shows, and, the kids would come home, they'd play. At 5 o'clock, they were eating dinner. At 6 o'clock, they did something as a family, and maybe they got an hour of TV a night. But, that was when family was family, and life was structured, but it was good.
Right. It was very good.
Very good.
So, Patrick, I really want to have you back on the show here. Tell us some things that are coming up in your life that you're involved with here in the community that could be of service to veterans, to service to those who need a hand up in terms of the workforce, and some events that you're involved in that people can find out about and participate, or if they want to volunteer. I'd like you to have some time to talk a little bit more about some of your causes.
Sure. No, 100 Men is definitely by far one of my favorite charities. Every quarter we pick 3 to 4 charities. We raise money, and that night they have money. They have operating capital. Those are always
We were
great
so
events.
fortunate last night at Charlotte Hall to be supported by 100 Men.
No, well, we
so
appreciate
grateful.
you guys. With the advisory board with U.S. Vets, going out there with the Fox grant for suicide prevention. That's a big one. Right now, workforce is, getting employers and saying, you know what, take that chance. They may not be the perfect fit when they come through the door, but, if they've got the qualifications, train them.
These men and women want independence, not dependence.
Exactly. And, nobody, like I said, nobody shows up at DES every day and says, I don't want to work. People want jobs. But,
That's right.
But we've got to figure out how to help them. How do we help the underemployed? There's just so many cool things. We're going to put on an event this fall, working with Congressman Crane's office to bring all the service academies and all the military recruiters into one location and make it a full afternoon where moms and dads and the family can show up and learn more about the military.
That's great.
How do we do it? Because right now you got recruiting offices. Kids don't know how to navigate. If it's not on a phone, put the phone away.
Or in the gymnasium that one day.
Sure. What I liked about your presentation last night is put the phone away. There's enough here to see and do and learn.
Right.
You can do without your phone for 20 minutes. I've done a bad job because I've been looking at the commercials. But you can. And the phone, there's just so many great things to do, learn, and that's what I'm saying about the history. We have so many different events that come into town right now. how do we get them into our museums and our different locations to
Right.
learn more about the history? Because, people are coming up for a golf tournament. They're not going to play golf 12 hours a day. They're looking for other entertainment. How do we do that? How do we make concierge services? How do we get the word out to the people coming up to camps? Hey, maybe stop in Prescott on your way in or out and learn some of the history.
Well, we have a brand new exhibit that's going to be opening here on our campus in our research center on Vision for Vets.
Good.
And we're going to have some announcements that coming up that people are going to be able to come over and walk through the exhibit and learn the stories of these brave men and women who've served our country.
That's awesome.
So, Patrick Kuykendall, thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for your service to and your dedication to our community here in Prescott, Arizona. And I look forward to you being back on the show very soon.
I look forward to it. Thanks for having me, Stuart.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing you here back on Arizona Roundup at Charlotte Hall Museum.